and welcome to Military History Inside Out, brought to you by WarScholar. We talk about military history from ancient times to modern, and everything in between. I'm Chris Alvarez, and thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out my new interviews with Tilda Cold Holt about her new Viking fantasy novel Northern Wrath, which you can find at fullcontactnerd.com, and my interview with Bill Airy about the Apollo 11 spacesuit, found at technologyandspace.com. The links can be found in the show notes. Thank you. I'm speaking with Frank Sisson and Robert L. Wise, co-authors of I Marched with Patton, a first-hand account of World War II alongside one of the U.S. Army's greatest generals, published by William Morrow, October 1st, 2020. Thank you both for speaking with me. Now, as you mentioned, Robert, Frank lived this heroic story. So first, tell me, how did you two connect to write this story?
Well, I've known Frank Sisson and Frank and Donna Sisson for, oh my goodness, probably 50 years. And I was at their house, and I noticed on the wall a plaque up here that says Veterans of the Battle of the Bulge. And so I turned to Frank, and I said, Frank, what is this? And he kind of mumbled a little bit about he was in the Battle of the Bulge. And I said, well, you've never talked about it. And he said, well, I never talk about it. And I said, well, let's start. And he started telling me stories of World War II, and that's how the book began and came into being. Mm-hmm.
So, Frank, what made you decide to go ahead and participate in writing a book, considering you didn't really want to talk about it?
Robert, for one, kept saying, Frank, this is good stuff. It's book stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I started putting the articles together and giving them to the master of writing, and he tied them all together and come up with the book. Mm-hmm. But I lived every inch of that book.
Did you write any of it down yourself, like notes or diary or anything?
No. I made some notes, but I gave them all to Robert, and he tied them together in the book.
Mm-hmm. So let's start with Frank's the start of his military career. What happened there?
My military career, I was in California when I became 18 years old. But I had gone to California to work in the shipyards. They taught me how to weld two pieces of metal together, and sent me to California. And in fact, I went to Stockton, California, and then Alameda, California, and worked in the shipyards. And surprisingly, the name of the shipyard was Kaiser Wilhelm Shipyard. And then when I got 18, I didn't want to go in the Navy, so I headed back home to Oklahoma and went down to Lawton and volunteered
to
be in the United States Artillery.
So you got...
Which I did, and I was sure glad I did, because I met a lot of great guys, and I'm not much of a hero, but I was with a bunch of heroes, and I know how they act.
Did you get to choose artillery?
I beg your pardon?
Did you get to choose artillery when you signed up?
I chose the artillery. Yes, I did. And I'm glad I did, because that's one of the best decisions I've made in my life. And my father died when I was 14 years old, so that left me the head of household. And I had to quit school and go to California and work in the shipyards to make a living. And then when I got 18, I left there and went to Fort Sill, the United States Artillery School. Mm-hmm.
And so when was that? Like, what month and year did you sign up?
Oh, it was my birthday is June. So I guess that must have been around the 15th when I went down to Lawton and volunteered. So.
Mm-hmm. And what year was that?
Well, let's see. I was 18 at the time, and I was born in 1925.
Oh, okay.
Somebody do the math on that.
So the war had started already.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The war was started. Had started already, and I did a lot of catching up.
Where were you when Pearl Harbor was bombed? Where were you, and what'd you think?
When Pearl Harbor was bombed, Bob, I was in my town of Wilika, and I was in front of my sister's house, and saying, "Oh, that's too bad," by everybody else, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I was at that time. I wasn't quite 15, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And
I must have been right about 15 at that particular time.
mm-hmm. And did everyone kind of expect to end up going to war at that point, or was it kind of a big shock?
No, the group of kids that I ran around with didn't believe it would go much further. They thought it was going to be over almost instantly.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any idea of what was going on. I was just a 15-year-old kid and didn't know here comes Sick'em.
Mm-hmm. So you went to Fort Sill and signed up. How much training did you do there? What was that like?
I think it was 18 weeks at Fort Sill, and then I went to Brownwood, Texas, for organization, and that's where the 667 Field Artillery was born.
Mm-hmm. And so when did you learn you were going over to Europe? I guess you went to the UK first.
Well, we had 17 weeks of training there at Camp Bowie, Texas, Brownwood, Texas, and then we started shipping out to England at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We shipped out of England and zagged all over the ocean trying to get there because we were dodging all kinds of German submarines,
mm-hmm.
and we got there all in one piece.
Good.
And sick and tired of. We went over on a big yacht. It was the New Amsterdam was the name of the ship that I went over on, and boy, it was some ship, you know.
You said you didn't want to join the Navy, and there you are sailing across the sea.
Well, I know it, but I knew I had to go somewhere to get over there, but I didn't want to live on a ship aboard out in the ocean. I kept telling that recruiter, I don't want to be a sailor, I want to be a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, I can walk a lot further than I can swim. I kept telling that recruiter, said, I can swim pretty good, but I can walk a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, they got me in, and 2 weeks, I was in the Army 2 weeks, and they made me as assistant drill sergeant. So I had what it took to be a soldier.
So
I had a bunch of great men to help me.
So did you go over with your equipment, or did they send you separately?
We went with our equipment. We had our guns aboard the ship, we had 650 men on that ship at least. That was our outfit for our company and for a division, 667 Field Artillery Division.
Mm-hmm. And how many guns did your company have? Were you in charge of?
We should have had 4 per company. We had 4 companies.
Mm-hmm.
So 16.
Okay. And did you know did you work every part of being field artillery, or was there a specific job?
We were specialized.
Mm-hmm.
I had 5 soldiers with me, and our job was to keep the telephone communications using wire communication, have everybody to know up to date what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that was some job, because half the time you could look across the line and see the enemy doing the same thing we were doing. And it was a very, very dangerous job, because we worried about snipers and that sort of stuff. That far in, in as much as we were that close to the enemy. And we would put an observation point, a high area in the camp. If it was like 1,000 feet hill, we had to have a wire communication command on top of that hill, so we could overlook the whole valley and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to do it in a hurry.
How did you? Were you excited, anxious? How nervous were you when you guys finally reached? I guess you went to the UK first, right?
Yeah, I was nervous because I'd never been out of the state of Oklahoma except when I went to California to work in the shipyards. And now here I am on a big luxury liner in the ocean, dodging German submarines. And now I was scared to death, just like all the other kids. But we went over there as kids, but we come back men.
Yeah, you went through it. I'm speaking with Frank Sisson and Robert L. Wise about I Marched with Patton. You can find more information about the book at the William Morrow website. If you like this podcast, Military History Inside Out, so far, please subscribe to it and rate it if you can. If you want more military history ranging from the ancient to the modern, please visit warscholar.org or militaryhistorypodcast.com to sign up for my weekly newsletter and keep up with my latest posts. You can also find written interviews and my social media links there. You can find the links to my other podcasts at fullcontactnerd.com and technologyandspace.com. And now back to the podcast. So did you, so I guess on D-Day, did you participate in D-Day then?
No, that was just a little bit ahead of me.
Okay.
No, I landed in St. Lo, France when we landed in England, and then they transferred us, and we went down to St. Lo, France, and that place was a bombed-out wreck. We didn't hardly have a place to sleep, so the whole town was tore up. So, but that's where we got into the battle at St. Lo, France.
Frank, tell them about what happened with the family that you stayed with, and what had happened to their family across the street, what the Germans had done.
Well, as a non-commissioned officer, I had the authority to commandeer quarters for my men, of which I had 5 men, and myself made, I had six, and mine made 7. So we found this little cottage, and the people received us as if we were kings, or we were something like the Roman warriors or something. They treated us like royalty. And we stayed at this little house, and we told the lady there, the grandmother, we told her, you can keep your quarters as they are, and your kitchen privileges are just as they always been. And we're just going to be in the way here for you a couple of days, and then we'll go forward to another position. And while we were talking, she said, I'd like to update you on my life here with my husband. My son lived across the street from me, and he and his wife had 2 children, a girl and a little boy. And the Nazis moved into, and they took over everything. And the little 4-year-old boy called this one guy a dirty Nazi. And she's telling this story, and this little boy called this soldier a dirty Nazi. Well, he pulled out his pistol and shot the little boy in the head. And the little girl heard the shot and heard the scream from the little boy, and she ran over there to hug the little boy, and the soldier pulled out his pistol again and shot the little girl.
Wow.
And the father ran out to see what was going on, and the officer shot him, and also the mother when she ran out. So they wiped out that whole family. Mother and dad with no grandchildren.
Did that guy, did that make you angrier and more?
Yeah, it did. It made us realize that we were up against people that were really mean people. And the longer we were there and the more witnesses I had with the people and the soldiers, the more I realized that the Nazis were really, really Satan personified.
Did you or any of the guys speak any French or German to get by there, or was it all English?
Well, I didn't get that. I didn't. I had a little problem sometimes with my hearing, but I didn't hear what you said, sir.
Sure. So, did you or any of the other guys know any German or French, or did you just try to speak in English with the locals?
No, we everybody had learned a little bit of German. And I couldn't learn any French at all because I didn't like the language. But I could speak enough German to get by.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be half English and half German, and but we did pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us learned the language a lot quicker, but I kind of relied on my old English. I could talk my way out about anything.
Yeah. So I guess you got along with the French people, though. It sounds like.
Oh yeah, we got along with the civilians. Like I said, they treated us like kings.
Mm-hmm.
They thought we were conquering heroes, and we kept telling them we're not conquerors, we're liberators.
Mm-hmm.
We're just here to see that you get a square deal.
Mm-hmm.
We want to liberate you from the Germans or from the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
We never had a more bad word for the German people,
Mm-hmm.
but it was the Nazis that we were there to defend them against.
Mm-hmm. So at what point, the title is You Marched with Patton. At what point did you hook up with Patton's?
I was in the Ardennes Forest,
Mm-hmm.
and my men were laying in some wire that a tank had come through and tore up the wire, and I was directing traffic while they were fixing the wires. And one of my men came over to me and said, "There's a staff car coming down the hill over here." So I looked, and it had flags on the front fenders, which means their generals are better.
Mm-hmm.
And they got down close, and I could see Eisenhower. Then I saw President
Omar Bradley.
Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Patton.
Patton came in the last.
Mm-hmm.
And I jumped to give them a rifle salute, and they all smiled and gave me they gave me a salute, which is not necessary,
Mm-hmm.
But they did and made me feel real good. But as soon as they left and got down the hill a little ways, the artillery started coming in, knocking the top out of trees, and everybody was diving for security and safety. And I dived under an old bombed-out Tiger tank.
Mm-hmm.
And those are big, big Tiger tanks. They're huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working my way to the center of the tank when I bumped heads with something. I looked up, and it was a kid I had gone to school with back in Weleeka, Oklahoma. And we hugged each other, and I hate to say it, but we cried a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Hey, no, it's you meet a friend of yours in a tough situation. That's good. It's good.
Repeat.
Oh, I just said it's good to see a friend, an old friend in a tough situation. It always feels good, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Or did you feel bad seeing him there with you in this situation?
I never saw the person again.
Mm.
So I asked about him when I came home, and nobody could tell me anything. So I just assumed he didn't make it.
Yeah.
We tried not to make friends because when you did, they buried the guy the next day. So we tried not to make friends. We called each other by their first name. Mm-hmm. If we knew it, if we didn't know it, we just called him corporal or sergeant or whatever his rank was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We tried desperately not to make friends.
No, I understand. So how much? Actually, when you saw the generals, did you know exactly who they were, or did you just know?
I knew who they were. Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so did everybody there. And they were cheering and cheering from all sides.
Mm-hmm.
The generals waved as they went through our camp. And as soon as about 2 or 3 minutes after they passed, the Germans had figured about where they were, so they started shelling that area. Mm. And fortunately, the generals got through without any problems.
Yeah. So what were the toughest conditions in which to do your work? Was it the forest? Or?
Well, this was wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
This was, the temperature was 70 below zero. Now, that's hard to understand because 20 degrees will freeze food in your deep freeze. And 70 below will freeze your deep freeze.
Yeah. So how'd you...
But I still have trouble with my hands. I froze my hands and froze my feet, but the doctor washed or medic washed my feet and hands and face and the snow, rubbed snow all over my face and hands, and then wrapped me in a blanket.
Wow.
They got by okay.
So, did you anything else special that you did to stay warm or keep your equipment warm?
Well, it wasn't. I wore everything I had, you know, and I was really uncomfortable all the time because of all the clothes that I had on, and the Germans were as bad off as we were because that's the worst temperature that Belgium had in the record. They've never had that cold in record time. And I don't know how long Belgium's been there a long time, but you can't believe what 70 below is. You just have to see it and feel it.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable how cold 70 below is. And that lasted for 42 days, and we were out. We couldn't build a fire. We couldn't turn on a lantern because the enemy was a couple of hundred yards away, and we didn't want to highlight the fact that we were there available, you know. So we just had to wrap clothes around us and let it go.
Did you get any chance to get warm during that winter, or was it all just outdoors?
No, it varied. It varied. It warmed up. It'd get 40 below and then down 30 below, and then it's like 32 degrees, and that was like hometown, 32 degrees, you know. No, it lasted about 42 days from what I remember. It sounded like it lasted for 2 years, but it really wasn't. And it's kind of hard to remember exactly when it really warmed up, but I do know that in March we all came into the billets area and took a shower. And they put a truck up there, and that was the worst mistake we ever made, taking those showers. Because boy, you had the first class case of itch.
Oh, wow!
It was just you wish you hadn't taken that shower because you were just too uncomfortable.
Wow!
But nobody took a shower, and everybody stunk, and nobody knew it.
Yeah, yeah. You just live with it.
Frank, you crossed the Rhine with Patton,
Yeah.
and went on to Berlin as a military policeman, right?
I had an experience on the Rhine River. At the closing of the war, the Germans started building some little jet airplanes, and they painted them jet black. And we were crossing the Rhine River, and we were almost across, and I looked down the stream from where we were, and I saw this little black airplane, and I jumped in the back of the truck and spun my 50 caliber machine gun around. No, this was a 30 caliber machine gun we had, and spun this gun around and zeroed my sights in on this airplane, and I couldn't get the hammer back to start firing, and I yanked and yanked and yanked, and I couldn't get it back, and that plane was coming right at us, and it pulled up, and I could look at the pilot right in the face, and he looked in my face and probably wondered why I didn't pull the trigger. But as soon as he was out of my range, that hammer came back just automatically. And I told my driver, Mr. Parker, and he was the senior of our crew, and he said, I worked on that gun last night for 2 hours. And I said, I saw you working on it. God didn't want me to kill that pilot, and because he just didn't want me to kill him. And that's some reason I'll never know.
Well,
A lot of things happen like that. It's just the spur of the moment, and it's over, and it's gone, and many places forgotten.
so that pilot didn't shoot at you guys either, then?
Pardon?
So it sounds like the pilot didn't do any shooting either, or bombing.
No, he was shooting, but he stopped.
Oh.
When he banked and started coming up that bank, where our truck was, he stopped shooting. And then when I couldn't pull the trigger on him, he just kept going. He was gone, never come back.
So how did you get across the Rhine? Was it in this truck, or how did you get?
In a 3/4-ton truck, and my men run along in the front of it, and I sat beside the driver, and that's the reason that I was there when they needed me, and I couldn't get the gun to fire. So probably a good thing. I don't know. That young man flying that plane, but he was a Nazi. He wasn't just a German; he was a Nazi.
Right. So
Frank was a military policeman in Berlin before the city was officially divided up. Had to contend with the Russians.
Oh yeah, and the Russians gave us more trouble than anybody.
Oh, right.
The ordinary or the dumbest GI could be a general in the Russian army.
They were that bad.
No kidding. You know, Fuzzy Smith, the out of shape soldier, American soldier, could be a general 90 days in the Russian army.
What?
Well, they just pulled those off the planes and you gave them a gun and said, "Here, shoot. If you don't shoot it, give it to your friend, and whenever they shoot you, he'll get the gun." So they didn't have the ammunition or the rifles. They had 2 men to a gun. In many places. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, your ball.
No problem. No. Did you try to be friendly with the Russians? What were they like to deal with?
No, you couldn't be friendly with them. They were heathens. They were worse than the Nazis.
Wow.
I mean, they were just dumb ox. You can't believe how dumb the ordinary Russian soldier was. I was a sergeant in the military police, and I was a detective for the United States Army. And they brought a general in, and he was intoxicated, and so was his driver. Well, we put the driver in the jailhouse, and we set the general down in a nice chair and give him something to look at, and try to be nice to him, because you can't disarm an officer unless he's in for a felon. And this man was just drunk, is all. But he didn't like the way we were treating him, so he grabbed a file cabinet file and started beating the clerk over the head with it.
Oh, wow.
And I swung the general around and shoved him down, and he backed up against a brick wall. And I thank God for brick walls, because I knew I was going to have to draw my pistol. Well, I was going to come. He was too far away, and I couldn't get to him. And lo and behold, he started pulling that little old pistol. He had like a little 38 and a wore-out Scout. And I said, "What am I going to do? I cannot kill that. I can't kill that general in this headquarters. Not in MP headquarters. Everybody in my hometown is going to know about this. What am I going to do? And your mind can do great, great things if you just turn it loose and let it go." And it said, "Okay, shoot between his legs." And if he still insists on coming on up with that gun, shoot him between the eyes. Well, he threw that gun. When I shot between his legs, he threw that old beat-up pistol into the air and started hollering, "Niet, niet, niet, niet," which means no in Russian. And
yeah.
But anyhow, well, I lost my thought pattern here. But anyhow, I took the gun away from him, and I called the warden downstairs, and he came up, and I told him, I said, "Put this trash in the doghouse down there, and we'll call these people to come and get him." And so when he came up, he let this guy out of that puddle of water he was standing in, and took him downstairs and slammed him in the slammer, and that's the last I ever heard of that.
Yeah.
But my commanding officer, that was very funny. My commanding officer was a lieutenant, and he ran over to me and started hugging me, and I said, "Wow, I don't get hugged by the big boss either very often." And And he said, well, Frank, you did the exact right thing. If you'd have killed that general, you wouldn't have got to go home for a year.
Wow.
They'd have kept you over here on purpose for a year.
Yeah.
And I thought about, well, if I'd have had George Patton with me, he'd have shot all of them.
Yeah. So did you get to see Patton again at any point?
Yeah. Let's see.
Didn't you hear him give one of his speeches with a lot of
Oh
profanity?
yeah, I've heard him. I heard him give a speech to a bunch of ladies,
Mm-hmm.
And he was using profanity that I had never heard. You know.
Wow.
Yeah, George had a bad mouth. He just said what he thought, and if there happened to be somebody there to take offense to it, he just nodded his head and smiled. You know. But he was the best general I ever saw.
Actually, one of my...
The only thing he needed to do was control his tongue. Other than that, he was a great, great man.
You didn't... did you ever... A good friend of mine said her grandfather was his driver during the war. You didn't know his driver at all, did you? Or no?
Driver?
Yeah. His driver?
Well, I had a 3/4 pound truck, a 3/4 ton truck, and I had a driver taking care of that for me. He was about 10 years older than I was, and so he kind of treated me like a little boy.
Oh, really?
For a little while, till he found out I was a man.
Yeah. Now, was he part of your group, or was he a driver assigned?
He was my steady driver. You know, I had 6 men, and each one of them had a specific job of laying telephone wire, and I had the privilege of being the boss.
Were you the youngest of the group?
Pardon?
Were you the youngest one, even though you were in charge?
No, a couple of them were 18. That's what I was. I was 18, and Mr. Parker was about 30 or 35. And we called him Mr. Parker because he weighed about 275, and nobody wanted to insult anybody that big, you know.
Yeah.
But he was a great man. I just loved him, and I thought more of him as a big brother.
I'm speaking with Frank Sisson and Robert L. Wise about I Marched with Patton. You can find more information about the book at the William Morrow website. If you like this podcast, Military History Inside Out, so far, please subscribe to it and rate it if you can. If you want more military history ranging from the ancient to the modern, please visit warscholar.org or militaryhistorypodcast.com to sign up for my weekly newsletter and keep up with my latest posts. You can also find written interviews and my social media links there. You can find the links to my other podcasts at fullcontactnerd.com and technologyinspace.com. And now back to the podcast.
Frank, what were your recollections of what it was like to be in Berlin immediately after they surrendered?
Oh, man. Well, we sat outside of Berlin for about 2 weeks, I guess, waiting for the Russians to capture the town. And they didn't know hello from goodbye, you know. I don't have very much respect for the Russians. You probably already figured that out.
So...
No, the Germans, they were friendly to us, but in Berlin, that was the home of the Nazis, and you had to make believers out of them before you could get along with them, you know. But we did. But the Russians, like I said, the Russians caused more trouble than the Germans ever did.
There's a part of your book about Dachau. Did you
Dachau?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I stayed away from that.
Okay. You didn't have to deal with anything like that?
No, I didn't. I helped. I saw some some soldiers putting somebody in a pickup in a 3/4-ton truck like ours, and then an old beat-up yellow bus came up, and they were carrying people out of this building and put them in there. My driver, Mr. Parker, said, "Frank, I think that's prisoner of war camp." And I said, "Well, let's just go by there. We got our job all done for the day anyhow." And we went over there. Sure enough, it was a concentration camp, and the caretakers of it were gone. You couldn't find them anywhere. And the doctors and nurses were picking these people up, and some of them were like 6 foot tall, but they only weighed about 85, 90 pounds.
Wow.
They had just lost all their weight, and they looked like just so pitiful, and they were desperate to hug us and kiss, and fall down and kiss our feet, and that sort of stuff. They were just out of their head, you know.
And what nationality were they?
They were Jewish nationalities. They were Jewish prisoners of war.
Oh, wow. So how did you end up becoming a police officer after doing...
The war was over, and I needed about 6 or 8 months, I think. I needed that for a rotation to go home after the war. And my captain said, to go up to Berlin, Frank, and I'll see that you get a good job up there. So he gave me a recommendation, and I went to Berlin as an inspector, trying to solve criminal cases and that sort of stuff. And I was only there about a year, but I had a lot of fun. And then when I got a relief, I was going to go home. They gave me a young man to train, and I had a lot of fun. I had a kid with him because he was a non-combat soldier, and if we had anything that was really nasty to handle, I tried to get him to handle it so he could get some real good experience, you know. And once a Russian truck ran over a female. She was in the street. She jumped off the curb and fell backwards, and that truck's tire decapitated her. And they called us, and we went out there, and as usual, they had already moved the body and everything, so we didn't have any evidence on them at all. And we was going to put them in the ambulance, so as to take them to the morgue, and I picked up the foot end of that gurney and told the kid to get the front end where the esophagus was hanging out of that woman, and he run to the curb and throw it up, and come back, and I said, "Pick it up, we got to get out of here."
Yeah.
He picked it up again, got it off the ground, and run to the curb and throw it up again. And after about the third throw up, I turned it over to the German medics, and they loaded the lady up and took her out. And while we were in that area, I told my boy Friday, "You get the papers all filled out. I'm going to look over this morgue." And I was looking over the morgue, and I didn't like what I was seeing, because there was one cart in there that was covered up with a white napkin of some kind, and it was loaded with steaks. And as an old war combat soldier, I know the difference between a piece of meat and a piece of human. And all that on that tray was human. And I went back to the office, and I told my boss, I said, "I didn't fill out that form totally. I wanted to talk to you first." And I said, that morgue had a tray of human flesh, steaks on a tray.
Wow.
He said, "You did right, Frank. Don't say nothing about it. I'll take care of it." Well, he did, and about 3 months after I got home, I got a letter from him, and a paper, the Stars and Stripes newspaper, and it said in there that the military police had uncovered a human flesh trade in a morgue in Berlin. So it's a good thing I held off, or I'd have probably still been over there.
Wow. So were people that hungry?
Anyhow, that's some of the stuff you run up against as a soldier.
Wow. So you were a police officer for the city, not just...
For the rest of my tour, I was a police officer, you know.
But for the city, not just for the Army?
No, just the Army. just the Army. I
Okay.
was a military police officer, and I had some men working for me. I didn't have to do nothing. I was lazy. I laid around waiting for my furlough to go home.
Yeah.
And CIA tried to hire me, and I told them I didn't want anything to do with the CIA.
Huh.
And so I came on back home. I had all the war I wanted to have, and I wasn't any good at being a military policeman.
Did you, how'd you get along with the officers that you worked with throughout the war?
My officer, he loved me. He loved me. And he couldn't do enough for me. And now, that officer had a very particular happening to him. He was born and raised in Berlin. Born and raised in Berlin. And he got a visa to the United States and became a citizen and had joined the United States Army. And when they needed someone to take care of Berlin during, right after the war, they sent him over there. And he was a lieutenant, but he was waiting for his captain's stripes. And he was a fine gentleman. I enjoyed working with him.
That's good. But
he was not a combat soldier.
Did you I know it was obviously a rough time, but do you recall any good times you had when you were over there?
Good times?
Yeah.
Did you say good times?
Yeah. Did you have?
Yeah. When I could hear the guns a banging and all of the noise that was going on in the battle, that was my good times. I knew everything was working right.
Oh, I see.
And back when the weather was 70 below zero, I'd get a pillow and a blanket, and I'd go right over to the loudest gun, and I'd throw that blanket down, and I'd lay down and take a nap. I'd tell that gunner, if that phone rings, you wake me up. And he said, the only way I can wake you up is hit you with a club, I think. That's the way it was. You know, you took it when it was offered, you took it. And I kept warm laying up close to that gun because they kept them red hot.
Oh, wow.
They could put seven or 8 rounds of ammunition in the air before that first one hit the ground.
So when you were a police officer, did you investigate a bunch of cases?
No, I had people doing that. I didn't. No, I was just the boss.
Oh, okay.
I didn't do anything. I was the boss.
That's pretty good. Did you like Berlin at all?
Yeah, I liked it. It was very great, and there was places I visited when I could. And I remember once that we were going to raid this one place because we figured they were selling American bonded whiskey, and that would be a big no-no. And we lined up at the place, and everybody had their military police badges covered so you couldn't tell. And it was about 5 minutes to go, and we were going to raid this place, and I looked over and I saw an old friend I played football with in high school when I was a kid back in Welika. And I walked up beside him and kind of poked him in the ribs, and I said, don't look at me, just look away. And I'm going to stand here a minute, and I'm going to tell you, you get your people out of here like this place was on fire, but go out 2 people at a time. Don't go all at one time, because we're going to raid this place. And he got his female Fräulein and left. And then about a couple of minutes later, 2 of the others left, and then I have never seen that guy again. That's amazing how you see these people that far away from home, and then you come back home and, no, I never heard of him. He never did come back. You know, well, I knew he'd come back. The war was over.
Right.
You know, but nevertheless, funny things happen like that, and but he wouldn't have got into any trouble. But he would have had to answer a lot of questions, you know, because he was there. You know.
So did you get any souvenirs or bring anything back home?
Yeah, I got a German sword. That's all I wanted. And I tried to get a pistol, one of those Lugers. But it seemed like every time I found one, somebody was already there taking it off the guy. So I was always just a little bit behind. I never got my Luger. But I did get my German sword, and I got that hanging proudly in my den here.
Mm-hmm. So in the book, there's a little chapter that mentions marriage counseling. Well, what's that about?
Say that again.
There's a chapter on marriage counseling, or titled Marriage Counseling.
What about it?
What's that referring to?
Marriage counsel? I don't need that. I got the same wife I started with, and I want to end up. I don't want to have to train another one.
So, all right.
My gosh, man, that's asking a lot to try and train two wives in one lifetime.
So,
No, my wife and I have been married 72 years,
mm-hmm.
74 years, I'm sorry, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
We thank you so much for interviewing us, for interviewing Frank, and we hope that the story of this book, I Marched with Patton, can get out, because as I was writing it and experiencing it, it really touched me deeply, and I think there's a lot of people today who have forgotten how difficult and yet how important the contribution of the American soldier was in World War II, and the ability to share that experience and share that story will touch a lot of people. And we really thank you for listening to Frank today and sharing this story across the country.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to thank you, Frank, for the sacrifices you made, and doing what you did for the country and for the world, really.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate it completely.
I appreciate you letting me talk, and I hope I don't have to do it again.
No. I hope no one has to do it again. Thank you. Do you have any final words or anything, or because I don't have any other?
No, I just talk to the young generation. I tell them, son, daughters, you're living in the greatest country in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's still here because of people like you, Frank, who did what you did. So
Well, sometimes tears to your eyes when you see what's happening,
Mm-hmm. Well,
but anyhow, appreciate you hearing me, and thank you, sir, and have a good day. Thank you very much.
And thank you too, Robert. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, Military History Inside Out, please subscribe to it and rate it if you can. If you want more military history ranging from the ancient to the modern, please visit warscholar.org or militaryhistorypodcast.com to sign up for my weekly newsletter and keep track of my latest posts. You can also find written interviews and my social media links there. Thanks for listening.